Have you ever felt like you're speaking the same language as everyone else, yet somehow no one truly understands you? Not because you're smarter than everyone around you, not because you're better, but because your mind seems to experience the world differently. While others move on from a conversation in minutes, you replay it for hours. While someone else notices what happened, you instinctively ask why it happened. You don't just hear words, you notice pauses, contradictions, facial expressions, hidden intentions and emotions that were never spoken aloud. After a while, you begin asking yourself a painful question. Why do I always feel different? Many people immediately assume the answer is intelligence. They tell themselves that intelligent people are simply destined to feel alone, that society rejects deep thinkers, that the more intelligent you become, the more isolated your life will be. It sounds convincing, but psychology paints a much more interesting picture. Feeling misunderstood isn't caused by intelligence alone. It's the result of several psychological processes interacting with one another. How you perceive information, how you interpret uncertainty, how your brain predicts the future, and how you communicate your inner world to others. In other words, the problem isn't that your mind thinks too much. It's that your mind thinks differently. And understanding that difference changes everything. Intelligence is often imagined as a gift that solves problems, but every strength carries a hidden cost. Someone with exceptional physical strength places greater stress on their joints. Someone with extraordinary empathy may absorb the emotions of everyone around them. Likewise, a highly analytical mind often pays for its abilities with increased mental effort. Imagine walking through a forest. Most people notice the trees, some notice the weather, but another person notices broken branches, unusual footprints, the direction of the wind, the silence of the birds, and begins unconsciously building a story. What happened here? Why did it happen? What happens next? Their brain isn't trying to be different, it's simply doing what it naturally does. This ability is called pattern recognition. It's one of humanity's greatest cognitive strengths. Without it, scientists wouldn't discover new theories. Doctors wouldn't recognize diseases early. Engineers wouldn't solve impossible problems. Artists wouldn't create masterpieces from seemingly unrelated ideas. Pattern recognition is one of the engines behind creativity, innovation, and discovery. But the same mechanism that helps us discover truth can also trap us inside endless thinking. Because once the brain starts connecting patterns, it doesn't always know when to stop. A simple text message becomes a mystery. A short silence becomes a possible rejection. One strange facial expression becomes dozens of possible explanations. The mind keeps asking, what does this mean? Modern psychology suggests that our brains are not passive observers of reality. They are prediction machines. Every second, your brain is making guesses about what's about to happen. Will this person smile? Will they disagree? Will this decision succeed? The better your brain becomes at generating possibilities, the more scenarios it creates. Sometimes that's incredibly useful. Sometimes it's exhausting. People often call this overthinking. But overthinking isn't simply thinking too much. It's thinking without reaching psychological closure. Your brain continues searching for certainty long after enough information is available. And here's the difficult part. Life rarely provides complete certainty. There will always be unanswered questions, conversations you'll never fully understand, people who never explain themselves, opportunities you'll never know whether you should have taken. For an analytical mind, uncertainty feels unfinished, and unfinished thoughts demand attention. This is why many intelligent people don't necessarily experience more problems than everyone else. They simply spend more time mentally interacting with those problems. However, there's another misconception we need to challenge. Many people believe intelligence automatically leads to wisdom. It doesn't. Intelligence allows you to generate more possibilities. Wisdom allows you to recognize which possibilities deserve your attention. Those are completely different skills. A brilliant person can invent convincing explanations for something that never happened. A wise person asks, what evidence do I actually have? That single question separates curiosity from anxiety. Without wisdom, intelligence can become a machine that manufactures unnecessary fear. Without emotional balance, imagination becomes catastrophizing. Without self-awareness, analysis quietly transforms into rumination. And rumination doesn't produce clarity, it produces exhaustion. This is why some of the happiest people you'll ever meet aren't necessarily the smartest people in the room. They simply know when to stop thinking. That isn't ignorance, it's regulation. Psychologists often distinguish between intelligence and emotional regulation because solving mathematical problems and managing your own emotions rely on different psychological abilities. You can have an extraordinary IQ and still struggle with rejection. You can understand philosophy and still misunderstand your own feelings. You can predict global trends yet fail to recognize when you're mentally burning yourself out. Real psychological strength comes from integrating both worlds, a sharp mind and a calm nervous system. Because intelligence without emotional balance is like driving a race car with failing brakes. You'll move fast, but eventually, you'll crash. Perhaps the biggest misunderstanding of all is believing that feeling different makes someone superior. It doesn't. Every mind has its own advantages. Someone may never read philosophy, yet possess remarkable compassion. Someone else may struggle academically, but build relationships that last a lifetime. Another person may think slowly, but make wiser decisions because they aren't constantly overwhelmed by possibilities. Human minds aren't competing in a single race. They're solving different problems in different ways. The purpose of intelligence isn't to separate you from other people. It's to help you understand reality more deeply while remaining connected to humanity. And that's where many highly analytical people struggle. Not because they lack intelligence, but because somewhere along the way, they learn to trust their thoughts more than their relationships. In the next part, we'll discover why some of history's greatest philosophers believed that intelligence alone could never create a meaningful life, and why Carl Jung, Schopenhauer, Aristotle, Nietzsche, and Viktor Frankl each arrived at surprisingly different answers to the same question. What history's greatest minds discovered about intelligence? So if intelligence alone doesn't explain why some people feel disconnected, why have so many philosophers throughout history described the intelligent mind as both a gift and a burden? For thousands of years, some of humanity's greatest thinkers wrestled with the same question. Not how to become smarter, but how to live with a mind that never seems to stop searching. Each arrived at a different answer, and surprisingly, they were all describing different pieces of the same psychological puzzle. Carl Jung believed that one of the deepest human desires isn't happiness, it's wholeness. He argued that many people spend their lives becoming who the world expects them to be. They learn which emotions are acceptable, which opinions are safe, which dreams are realistic. Little by little, they build a personality designed to fit in. But another part of them remains hidden. The curious part, the creative part, the questioning part, the part that refuses simple answers. Jung called this lifelong journey individuation, the process of becoming the person you truly are instead of the person everyone expects. That journey often feels lonely, not because being authentic automatically pushes people away, but because authenticity usually begins before you find people who understand it. Many analytical people mistake this temporary loneliness for permanent isolation. Jung would argue otherwise. He believed that the more honestly you understand yourself, the more honestly you're capable of understanding others. Self-awareness doesn't separate us from humanity. It becomes the bridge back to it. Schopenhauer looked at the same human experience and reached a much darker conclusion. He believed that intelligence allows us to see realities most people prefer to ignore. Impermanence, suffering, the endless cycle of desire. According to him, the more clearly we understand life, the harder it becomes to escape its painful truths. It's an idea that has fascinated people for centuries. But psychology offers a more balanced perspective. Awareness doesn't automatically create suffering. How we relate to our awareness often matters far more than awareness itself. Two people can recognize the same difficult reality. One becomes trapped by it, the other uses it to grow. Knowledge doesn't determine our destiny. Our response to knowledge does. Friedrich Nietzsche challenged the assumption that discomfort should be avoided at all. He believed that growth requires friction, not because suffering is inherently valuable, but because avoiding every challenge often prevents us from becoming who we're capable of becoming. He warned against living according to expectations we never consciously chose. Instead, he asked a simple but unsettling question. Are you living your own life, or merely performing the version of yourself that earns approval? for someone who constantly feels misunderstood? That question changes everything. Perhaps the goal isn't convincing everyone to understand you. Perhaps the goal is understanding yourself clearly enough that constant approval becomes less necessary. But philosophy doesn't end with individuality. Aristotle reminded us of something equally important. Human beings are social creatures. No amount of intelligence can replace genuine friendship. No achievement can fully substitute for belonging. He believed that wisdom wasn't measured by how much someone knew, but by how well they lived. Knowledge without character was incomplete. Reason without compassion was incomplete. Even extraordinary intelligence reaches its limits when separated from meaningful relationships. Modern psychology continues to support this idea. Decades of research consistently suggest that strong social connections contribute significantly to psychological well-being. Not because relationships eliminate suffering, but because they help us carry it. Then came Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who experienced unimaginable hardship during the Holocaust. After surviving circumstances that stripped away almost everything, he reached a conclusion few people expected. The question wasn't whether suffering exists. It clearly does. The real question was whether suffering could still contain meaning. Frankl believed that human beings can endure extraordinary pain if they understand why they're enduring it. Meaning transforms endurance. Purpose transforms struggle. And suddenly, the conversation about intelligence changes. Perhaps intelligence isn't valuable because it makes life easier. Perhaps it's valuable because it helps us search for meaning more deeply. But only if we remember something essential. Thinking is not the same as living. Understanding is not the same as experiencing. Analyzing life is not the same as participating in it. Many highly analytical people slowly fall into an invisible trap. They become experts at observing life without fully entering it. They understand emotions, but hesitate to express them. They study relationships, but struggle to trust people. They search endlessly for certainty, while life quietly moves forward without waiting. Eventually, their greatest strength begins working against them, not because intelligence failed them, but because analysis quietly replaced action. Every philosopher we've explored recognized a different piece of this puzzle. Jung taught us to become ourselves. Schopenhauer warned us that awareness can become heavy. Nietzsche challenged us to create our own values. Aristotle reminded us that no one flourishes alone. Frankl showed us that meaning can exist even in suffering. Different philosophies, different centuries, yet all pointing toward one remarkable truth. A powerful mind is not defined by how much it can understand. It's defined by what it chooses to do with that understanding. And that's where modern psychology offers one final insight. Because the difference between a peaceful mind and an exhausted one often has very little to do with intelligence itself. In the final part, we'll explore the psychological habits that allow some deeply analytical people to thrive, while others become trapped inside their own thoughts, and how you can train your mind to become not just more intelligent, but genuinely wiser. The final part, from intelligence to wisdom. So where does all of this leave us? If intelligence isn't the problem, and loneliness isn't your destiny, then what actually separates people whose minds become a gift from those whose minds become a prison? The answer isn't found in IQ. It isn't found in philosophy alone. And it certainly isn't found in endlessly trying to understand yourself. It lies in something far more practical. Learning how to work with your mind instead of constantly fighting against it. The human brain is an extraordinary prediction machine. Its job is to identify threats, solve problems, and prepare for the future. But here's something it was never designed to do. It was never designed to make you happy. From an evolutionary perspective, your ancestors didn't survive because they felt peaceful. They survived because they noticed danger before it arrived. Your brain still operates by that ancient blueprint. It scans for problems, it searches for uncertainty, it imagines worst-case scenarios, not because it wants to torture you, but because it believes it's protecting you. For a highly analytical person, this system becomes even more powerful. A small misunderstanding turns into 10 possible explanations. An unanswered message becomes a story. A mistake becomes evidence of future failure. The mind keeps searching, not because it enjoys suffering, but because it mistakes certainty for safety. And that's the illusion. Complete certainty doesn't exist. No amount of intelligence can eliminate uncertainty. The wisest people aren't those who answer every question. They're the ones who learn which questions no longer deserve an answer. This is where emotional regulation becomes more valuable than intelligence itself. Psychologists often describe emotions as information, not commands. Fear tells you something might be wrong. Sadness tells you something mattered. Anger tells you that a boundary may have been crossed. But emotions are signals, not instructions. You don't have to believe every fearful thought. You don't have to obey every anxious prediction. Just as you don't chase every cloud that passes across the sky, you don't need to chase every thought that passes through your mind. The goal isn't to stop thinking, it's to stop believing that every thought is equally important. Imagine standing beside a river. Thoughts are like the water. Some are calm, some are violent, some carry useful ideas, others carry unnecessary fear. Trying to stop the river is impossible. Learning which thoughts to step into and which to let flow away is wisdom. Another lesson many analytical people eventually discover is that understanding people is very different from controlling them. You can understand why someone left and still never receive closure. You can understand psychology and still be misunderstood. You can do everything right and still face rejection because other people's choices belong to them, not to you. One of the greatest sources of psychological freedom comes from accepting a simple truth. Not everything is yours to solve. Some conversations will remain unfinished. Some relationships will end without explanation. Some questions will never receive satisfying answers. And that's okay. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's refusing to spend your life fighting realities that cannot be changed. But perhaps the most important shift of all is moving from observation to participation. Many intelligent people become spectators of their own lives. They analyze opportunities instead of taking them. They imagine conversations instead of having them. They prepare endlessly, while waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. Action is uncomfortable, but clarity rarely comes before action. It usually comes because of it. Confidence isn't built by thinking. It's built by doing. Relationships aren't built by perfect understanding. They're built by imperfect conversations. A meaningful life isn't created by collecting ideas. It's created by living them. The ancient philosophers understood this. Modern psychology confirms it, and neuroscience explains why. Your brain changes through experience. Every difficult conversation you choose to have, every fear you face, every new skill you practice, literally reshapes the neural pathways inside your mind. Growth isn't just poetic, it's biological. Perhaps that's the greatest misunderstanding about intelligence. People assume intelligence is something you're born with, but wisdom is something you practice. Every single day, you practice it when you pause before reacting, when you question your assumptions, when you choose curiosity over certainty, when you allow yourself to rest instead of solving one more imaginary problem, when you invest in people instead of only investing in ideas. In the end, your intelligence was never meant to make you superior to anyone else. It was never meant to isolate you. It was never meant to become your identity. It was meant to become a tool for understanding, a tool for creating, a tool for helping others. Because the most remarkable minds in history weren't remembered simply because they thought deeply. They were remembered because their thoughts became something larger than themselves. Art, science, medicine, philosophy, compassion, change. Maybe that's the real purpose of intelligence. Not to win arguments, not to prove you're different, but to leave the world a little wiser than you found it. So if you've spent years feeling misunderstood, remember this. There is nothing wrong with having a mind that sees patterns others miss. There is nothing wrong with asking deeper questions. There is nothing wrong with thinking differently. Just don't forget to live differently too. Think deeply, feel fully, stay curious, stay humble. And whenever your mind convinces you that you must solve every mystery before you can finally live, remember this. Life was never waiting for you to understand everything. It was only waiting for you to begin.